Your Royal Highness, distinguished guests, I'd like to thank you all for having me here. Avril, that was complimentary as ever. My policy still hasn't changed though, for the record. But I suppose I'm here to talk and I'll give you a bit of an insight, just my story, I suppose. Back in 2010, for anyone that doesn't know me, which is everyone really, bar Avril here, I was diagnosed with a condition called Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. Now, back then, that meant absolutely nothing to me. Now, I suppose it means everything to me. But there's probably some people here in the room that actually know more about the condition than I do, scientific speaking, but I suppose I've been living with it for the last 5 years, so my slant on things might be different, but it's my slant, I suppose. But as you can imagine, folks, that was a difficult enough time. I was 20 years of age, and up to this point, I'd been living, I suppose, what you'd consider, well, what I consider now in hindsight anyway, I had it all, really. I was a very sporty man or young man my whole life. Sports came easy to me. I played on every team going up along at my national sport. I was driving my car. I was working. I was doing all the normal things, and the things that I didn't take for granted, or well, I took for granted. And then March that year, I was back playing hurling, same as every other year, and basically I made a few little mistakes, and I thought I needed contact lenses. It was literally as simple as that. I went for an eye test, and I couldn't see out my right eye. And you'd all think, how is that so, or whatever, but the left eye was compensating, so I wasn't able to see a thing out the right eye. So, as you can imagine, you all know enough here about the research end of things, and I gave maybe 6 months trying to get a diagnosis. I was tested for everything, up and down, you name it. You know the routine here better than me probably, but like that, it was a case of ruling out before they could rule in. And it was chaotic time because all this time there was no answers being given, and yet daily tasks, I was losing them by the week. Leber's, for anyone that doesn't know, is degenerative. I suppose between about 7 and 9 months is what it takes to consume the central vision in both eyes. So, as you can imagine, like I said, I was going from driving my car and living what I say now was the perfect life. Like I didn't have much, but I had everything that I needed. So that put me to where I am. I'm 5 years later, but everything had happened in that space of time. I suppose up until the 9 months had passed that I stopped losing those tasks, I didn't know where it would end. I didn't even know how much is your central vision. Like where does your central stop? Where does the peripheral kick in? Like it was scary. And like I said, I was working at the time, but I was working in construction. So as you can imagine now, there's not really much place for 90% blind dude on a building site. But they were good to me, and they gave me a reason to stay getting up. And granted, my jobs were being moved aside every week, and what I could do last week I mightn't be able to do this week. But they gave me a reason to stay getting up and stay going to work, even though I could literally see myself becoming less useful, which is an awful way to be. But it was probably, scientifically wise, there was no cures there, and I suppose peace of mind is a cure in itself. So I had something to get up to, which meant everything. And then it got to the stage where literally I couldn't stay working, so I had to move along. And I suppose that probably took the first year out of having this condition. So there I was at 21, and what I say now is that life is pretty simple, but when I summed it up, I suppose I had my work life, I had my sporting life, and I had my social life. And 2 out of the 3 of those things were taken away from me. And they weren't even taken in a polite manner. So I was left at 21 trying to regroup and build a whole new life for myself. And that wasn't easy. And I put up a front for a long time. like that. The networks weren't there. I didn't know anyone with an eye condition. I'm from a rural community in Ireland. The networks just weren't there, and to be honest, I can see now that they were there, but I didn't want to know about them. For me, I was a fully sighted individual. I didn't want to give in to this being blind or any of the taboos or stigmas that went with it. I couldn't handle any of that. But I suppose after a lot of putting up a front and pretending I was better than I was, cracks started to show eventually anyway. And like I said about the 2 out of 3 things that were taken away from me, the one that was left was socialising. And I suppose I genuinely felt that going to the pubs and doing the things that the boys could do, that 1% of what my friends were doing, that I could do the same as them. I could go to a pub, go there, drink 10 pints, the whole lot, and be the exact same as any of them. There was no difference between me and them in that scenario. And that socialising actually ended up taking up all 3 ends of my life. So I suppose that had to all come to a halt, as you could imagine. There's not really a career in drinking, not yet anyway. But if there was, I would have made a good wage. But like that. But I was there and I was smiling and I was pretending things were okay, but I was crippled inside. I didn't know what to do or who to talk to, because I remember getting my diagnosis, and inside in the room were my 2 parents and myself, obviously, and the doctor was telling me the way it was and the way it was going to be, and in a manner that I didn't really appreciate. It was all way too blunt for my liking, but I remember my parents were the only ones crying, and I kind of took it on board that after that I was going to be the one to make it seem that I was okay, or I thought if I kind of crumbled, that the whole family was going to give in. So I kind of took that front on board, and that became my persona for 2 years until I couldn't do it anymore. And basically, my family knew I needed help, but it took a long time for me to accept it, an awful long time. And Avril there and Fighting Blindness and their crew kind of stepped in around that point. My family made a connection with them, and I went and I received counselling, and I've no problems with saying I received counselling, and I'm standing here. It was the best thing I ever did, because up to that, I thought that no one knew what I was going through, no one knew how I felt, and basically I was being completely self-centered about the whole thing, because I knew no different. But after the counselling and peer support, which I now see it meant everything to me, like literally just seeing that I wasn't the only one in this predicament, it got me out of a hole that I don't know where I'd be, I suppose, without it. And to that end, I want to thank Avril again. Like, I meet her at these events, and every time it brings it back to me that what that organisation did for me and where I've come from to be. So I suppose it was a case of, after the counselling, I decided that, right, at the end of the day, this condition, it's bad and it's whatever, but it ain't terminal. And I have 2 options here at 22. I can sit on my couch at home in the sitting room and just let the remainder of years just go on, and I'll wallow away in my sitting room and feel sorry for myself, or I can start getting back and I can start living again. And that's what I decided to do. And probably the most selfish decision I ever made was the best decision I ever made, because I stopped doing things for other people or pretending I was okay for the sake of other people. Now I can say I don't like this condition. I can say a lot more about it, but I think there's a more elegant crowd here than I'm used to talking in front of. So, but like that, I don't like it. I don't like having a rare disease, but I have one, and I can accept it, and I can talk about it. And all I'd love to do is really and truly, if there was anyone in the same position as me, I'd love to stop them making some of the mistakes I did, because there's almost a lifetime of heartache there in the 2 years that I put down that I'd love to be able to stop anyone else making. But like I said, I made that decision to regroup and get my life back together. So the sporting aspect was something that was huge to me and that I had lost. And I decided to look down different avenues, because just because I couldn't play with the mates that I grew up with didn't mean I couldn't get back into sport. So I went to a Paralympic Open day, like having, I suppose, natural sporting ability or whatever. Anyway, I got put in this fast track program for cycling, and from there, everything has just snowballed. I won a national title at home after 8 months. I've been put on a fast track program to try and get to Rio for 2016. I'm I've been out in Mallorca for the last month nearly. I've been out there twice since January, and in training for World Championships in Amsterdam the end of March. Like, my life compared to even the boy that Avril met in 2012, and that was only the beginning of it for me. There's no comparison here. The work that people like Avril are doing at home, like all you are doing here with EURORDIS, it's absolutely amazing. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I can honestly tell you, once upon a time I was a very lonely young man thinking that no one cared, that no one was doing anything, and I was on my own. And things like this, Berlin in May, I can see I'm greatly mistaken, and just thanks to everyone.